Hi to everyone. My name is Iñigo Antepara. I'm assistant professor at the University of the Basque Country in the Department of Economic Analysis. First of all, I would like to thank to Endanger Action and all the organizers of the Making Decarbonization Fair for this opportunity. I'm going to explain the project of the Basque social landlord Alokabide, submitted to the Proyecto Clima Code, and I will be explaining 3 examples. Alokabide is the Basque landlord for the public rental, and the building stock which is managing is over 230 buildings, which means 7,700 dwellings. And also, thanks to the Bizigune program, Alokabide is also managing the over 7,000 dwellings. So in total, around 15,000 dwellings. And taking into account the population, it is the biggest in Spain. Alokabide has an ongoing project for the renovation of the building stock, which is called Seroplana. Within this project, some energy audits have been performed, and as a result, the conclusion is that low-income households are overrepresented, and those tenants are under-consuming energy. Speaking about the energy poverty levels, we can say that more than 9% is in an energy poverty situation, which is more or less the same as in the rest of the Basque Country. But the women are overrepresented, and as much as high as 28% of the tenants are consuming less than 50% of the reasonable energy cost. For this Proyecto Clima Call, the activities selected by Alokabide can be included in 2 types of projects. The first one is the fossil fuels substitution of solar thermal, and the Spanish Fund for the reduction of CO2 emissions, which is organizing this call. They proposed the methodology for this case, a methodology for thermal energy projects that aim at reducing the fossil fuel consumption in a new or existing installation. And we will calculate the baseline scenario, which in the 2 cases presented is a boiler running on natural gas, and the project scenario it's the use of a solar thermal system for the production of domestic hot water. The third case is the renovation of a building. In this case, the methodology is for energy efficiency projects aimed at reducing fossil fuel consumption in a building. And the baseline scenario in this case is individual heating. And the project scenario is the placement of insulation on the facades and installing the heat pump and a ventilation system. The Project Clima was submitted in 2019, and it was approved in January 2021. We have to take into account that photovoltaic is not included in this code. The first project is a multi-occupancy building of 92 dwellings in Vitoria. It's an old building with an old solar thermal system, which was incorrectly installed because it was one of the first ones installed in the Basque Country. And the collectors will be replaced by vacuum tubes with a expected lifetime of 20 years. The ex-ante calculation in the baseline scenario, we have a boiler running on natural gas. We have the bills for 3 years, so we know the natural gas consumed, and we also can calculate the theoretical domestic hot water. For the project scenario, we know the area of the vacuum tubes, so we can calculate the energy produced, and it represents more than 28% of the domestic hot water, which is 3.63% of the natural gas consumed. So in the end, is a total emission reduction of 9 tons equivalent CO2. If we calculated the economic viability, we know the initial investment. We also know the maintenance cost, which is more or less €1 per person and per month, and the electric consumption of the water pumps. So we can calculate the net present value and the internal rate of return on invested. First of all, not taking into account the selling of the CO2 emissions, and in the second case, we take into account that money, but we have to buy or to contract a report for the verification of the emission, which can be an additional cost of €50. In both cases, the initial investment is not returned. The second case is very similar. In this case, it's also a multi-occupancy building. It's bigger than the previous one, but in this case, is the replacement of the solar thermal collectors, because the ones that they were installed, they were broken. In this case, the lifetime is 5 years higher than for the vacuum tubes. The baseline scenario is also possible to be calculated, and for the project scenario, we also know the area of the collectors, but as is not as old as the previous building, in this case, we cannot take into account the 30% of the energy produced by those collectors, because it's compulsory for this building due to the Spanish regulation. So in this case, the total emission reduction is only 3.5 tons of CO2. The economic viability, we have more or less the same, and also in this case, the initial investment is not recovered. The third case is the renovation of a building, a really old building in San Sebastian. It's a small multi-occupancy building of only 13 dwellings. And the project is the renovation up to nearly zero energy building. So for the baseline scenario and the project scenario, we're going to use the energy levels. The baseline is an energy level F. We can divide the consumption in heating and domestic hot water. But taking into account that as a conclusion from the energy outage, we know that the underconsumption of the demand is 30%. So we will have a lower energy consumption for heating. For the project scenario, the energy consumed for heating will be more or less the same, because it's quite low. The energy level is projected to be B, so it's quite low. In this case, the tenants are going to have higher temperatures at homes instead of low energy bills. And we will be during the project a heat pump will be installed, and only 3 tons of CO2 will be emitted. So if we do not take into account that the tenants are under consuming, the total emission reduction is 38.8 tons. But if we take into account the the underconsumption, the total emissions is only 27.7 tons. And in this case, the budget is quite high because we are speaking about the installation on the facades and a new heating system and also a new ventilation system. So even if we take into account the selling of the CO emissions, the initial investment is no returns. But we have to take into account that the economic viability will be much worse because if we take into account the consumption, we will be selling less CO2 emissions. So as conclusions, due to tenants under consuming for heating, the problem of under consumption has no effect in the first 2 cases because it's only about domestic hot water, but just in the third one, and the economic viability is affected. We have here the comparison between building a project for a building with average consumer, and on the right with when we have a low income under consumer. As we can see, we have a total emission reductions lower in the second case. So the policy recommendation in this case will be that the accounting of emission reduction should be justified on the basis of theoretical results. And also another conclusion of this study is that the decarbonization in the social housing sector is easier to achieve than the reductions of energy consumption. So thank you to Alokabide and the Department of Housing in the Basque government, and thank you all for your attention.